or Remax National. Oh, sorry. Uh, you guys, she is more than welcome to jump on a call with you, do a Zoom, and then show you everything that is available through Remax Commercial. You can go to the next screen, Christy.
Okay.
So with the commercial side of things, so where are you guys located?
Johnson City.
Okay. We'll give Larry just a second. So what I wanted to say is that I am on our local association education committee board, and a lot of times we talk about the commercial side of things, and a lot of people are interested in it, but it's really whenever we have the classes, either attendance isn't large or people are just kind of overwhelmed on how to even get started. And so that's what we're going to talk on today. And so with Remax Commercial, and there's so many different types of properties that fall into commercial. And so Remax Commercial covers, you'll see on this slide, all of the different properties: multifamily, retail, land, office, industrial, hospitality, farm, and ranch. And so some of those you may not think would actually like fall under commercial if they're not actually zoned commercial. So like land and even farm and ranch, you're like, okay, well, how does that fall under commercial? That you can actually purchase an existing and operating farm and ranch. And there's also lenders that are available that will actually provide the lending if someone wants to start a farm, that they can actually get a loan to actually purchase their livestock too. And so with commercial, there's lots of different avenues and lots of different ways to make stuff work and how to be creative in making this side of the business work. And so as far as like land goes, it could be land that is just even residential land could possibly be rezoned to commercial land. And so if you're thinking about getting started in commercial, you got to think, okay, well, how do I know that a property is commercial or could go commercial? And so if you'll go to that next slide, Christy. Every individual local government has zoning, unless they're in unincorporated. And so in my area, like Granger County, Sneedville, those are areas that would be unincorporated. There's some areas of where I'm at in Hamlin County that's unincorporated, but for the majority of it, all of properties have a zoning, and they are regulated by city and county. And so you can go on CRS, look at public record, and it will show you if it's got city and county taxes. You can tell the difference if it's city and county, but sometimes just the city will regulate city and county properties, or they may be split. So a lot of my examples I will use here to Morristown, or I may share Knoxville since I'm from Knoxville. I would imagine that a lot of our stuff here in Hamlin County, our planning coordinator was actually from Johnson City. And so a lot of Morristown is also going to replicate how Johnson City handles that, Melissa. And so that most of our governments, local governments, have a GIS program or a website where you can go and check the zoning on a property. Do not go off of CRS, the public record of what the zoning is, and do not go off of the state property assessor website on what the zoning is too. You always want to verify and check with your planning department, whether that's the city or the county. And then each of those will have, so like I've pulled up just an example of the zoning map for Hamlin County and shown like the legend on the side of it. And so this is the central part of Hamlin County, and you'll see all of the different like CB, that's Central Business District, IB is Intermediate Business, R3, LI is light industrial, the HI is heavy industrial. And so every property is going to be assigned one of those zoning codes. And then
Are
with
those standardized, Leslie?
I'm sorry.
Are those codes, those two-digit codes standardized? Are
Um,
they the same everywhere?
They are
Others,
not the same everywhere. So like Knoxville will
okay,
have slightly different, but Knoxville does commercial. So they'll do C1, C2, C3, and those regulate the density of what you can have in those. They have like an R14 zone that allows you to have little pocket neighborhoods. And so each of those are going to be different for where you are at. So with Knoxville, are you in Knoxville area?
Johnson City,
Johnson
Kingsport
City.
area,
Okay.
like
I ha-
Melissa.
I haven't really dealt with Johnson City a lot, but like in Knoxville, they have their website is Knox MPC, or they have a KGIS for the Knoxville GIS program, and they have their zoning map on there as well. So it really just depends. But in general, like I can look at Knoxville's and know that, okay, this is commercial because it has a C in front of it.
Okay.
And so with each of these, and this is where there's so much information, and you just have to really just dig into it as far as like getting to know it and understand it, and just time is experience. And so with each of these that you see, like the R3, RP1, MUD, then each one has an ordinance that's assigned to it. And so you can go to that ordinance, and they are provided to you on the website where you obtained what the zoning is. And then each of those will tell you what is allowed in that zone. So I'm going to use the intermediate business one, for example. And so if I have a property that I'm looking at listing, or I'm representing a buyer and it's in the intermediate business zone, and they have a welding shop and they want to put up a warehouse, I would pull up that intermediate business zone, and I would go through the permitted uses, and those are outlined. And then there's going to be some that are permitted on review. And so if the welding would be in a manufacturing type industry. And so if I do not see that on that list, then that means that that use would not be allowed in that zone. Now, it is possible that maybe it's under that zone in a permitted use on review. I just happen to know that that one is not. That would be a light industrial use. And so whenever I am looking for that specific buyer, and I know that they have a welding shop, and I've already, it really is beneficial to get to know the people in those departments too, and have that rapport and that communication with them. So you could call them up and say, hey, I'm looking for a welding shop. What kind of zoning am I going to need? And then I would come to this map, and I could see the pockets of Morristown of where I need to go to find them a property. Or if it's something that's listed, and I'm going to touch on what I just said just a minute, that I will a little bit later as well, is a lot of commercial is not going to be listed on the MLS. It is going to be, you are going to find out about it by networking with other agents that just happen to know the property owner, or cold calling. Cold calling is my livelihood. Get comfortable with it. I've joked about having cold calling classes here. I do a little bit of background on them, maybe look at their Facebook page, stuff like that, find out a little tidbit. And then when I first make the introduction, I talk about everything but the reason why I'm calling them. And then a lot of times it, just goes from there, and I just let them know who I am and what I'm doing and what I'm looking for. Would they be willing to work with me? And a lot of stuff, I've got so much of commercial that I know that I'm not getting the listing because the seller doesn't want to put it out there. But if I come across a buyer and I know that that works, I mean, that's what this business is, especially this side of the business, is getting creative and collaborating with people. So it may take 2-3 years to find the appropriate property for someone. But whenever I meet someone, and I'm like, that light bulb goes off, and it's like, oh, I have the perfect property for you. It just isn't listed. And so while we're on the slide and talking about zoning and the individual, like local governments that you have to deal with, there's more than just zoning that goes involved in this. If it's not zoned the correct like zoning that you need, you can actually put an application in for it to be rezoned to what they do need. So just because you look at this and it's not what you need, don't stop there. A lot of this is just getting after it and just asking the question. You never know until you ask. And so one thing that you can do is if I see where the IB meets light industrial and I need light industrial, but there's the one property that's over the line that's in the IB zone, but it would work for them, but it's not zoned correctly. That planning department's going to look at that, and they're going to look at the properties that's surrounding it and say, does this make sense? Would we consider rezoning this intermediate business property to light industrial for this use? And so unfortunately, you are at the mercy of your planning department when it comes to this. And it upsets buyers and it upsets sellers because the government has so much say over a property that you individually own. But it is what it is, and you have to just figure out how to get through those hurdles. There's a lot of hand holding, and I understand the process, so I handhold through the entire process. With commercial, it's just, and you guys know this probably from residential too, you handhold a lot more. With residential, I feel like it's hand holding emotions. In residential, it's just hand holding the process. It's all paperwork and processes and money. So do you guys have any questions about the zoning part?
Well, I just want to make a couple comments. One, Melissa loves cold calling. So these codes again, are they, because I've run into this a little bit. Are they by county or are they by entity? Like a city might have different codes in a county, or
Sure.
where do you go
So
for the codes?
So I'm going to talk about Hamlin County since that's where I'm at, and I'm
That's
happy
fine.
to help figure out Johnson City with you guys. And so with Hamlin County, we have a city website and a county website.
Okay,
But the city website has that GIS program. And so I can go to mymorristown.com, and they have a development tab, and that's where I can find the zoning map. It's nice
okay.
because the city of Morristown, I can see the county zoning on that GIS program by just changing my filters. And so then I can find out what the county zoning is. But whenever it comes to the ordinances for each one, it's going to be specific to if it's city or county. So I would imagine that it's the same way in Johnson City.
I would imagine too. They can't make it easy, can they?
No, nothing's easy, but that with this, it's just one, having thick skin and being intentional and not giving up. And I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. And so I think I'm ready for the next one, Christy, if they've. Okay, so let's say that all of the different ways that you could be involved in a commercial transaction. So the commercial real estate cycle: buy, finance, build, manage, lease, sell. And so there are so many different avenues of how you would be involved. So like with us, in residential, we either have a listing or we're representing the buyer. And so it's very similar in commercial, except for there is a whole nother realm of selling and leasing. And so you can be a buyer rep where the buyer is going to purchase land. They're going to get it financed to build their building on it. They may possibly just buy the land and then you're out and you don't have to go through any of the other construction process. That you can be a tenant rep. And so that's where you have, I've got a nail salon, and I put a nail salon in a strip center that's on the west end of Morristown, and they got a 5-year lease from that tenant. And so you can be a tenant representative. You can represent the landlord at that strip center. And then the seller rep is there's this warehouse that the seller wants to sell. And those are all of the different, things that you can do as far as your representation in a commercial transaction. There's also, I'm going to bring up the management side of it. It's very common for a commercial agent to manage someone's shopping center. And so, and it's all specific to the landlord. And so it's kind of very similar to residential property management. It's just you're doing it with the landlord's each individual tenant space that's there. I do believe you have to have a different certification for property management, but on the commercial side of things, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't quite, like a confirmation of agency. That's not a disclosure form that you make in commercial. That's outlined within the agreement itself. And so there's going to be some stuff that doesn't quite translate from residential over into commercial. So if I had a landlord that had a shopping center, I would be able to represent them and manage their leases in those things. And the great thing about that is once that tenant's done, like when that 5 years is up on that nail salon, then that landlord's going to call me and say, okay, well, I would actually reach out to the nail salon and say, okay, are you guys wanting to renegotiate your lease? Are you guys wanting to be there? And then I would get to have a whole nother deal at the end of that 5 years, just by being involved in that. Anything here? Okay, so I'm ready for the next one, Christy. Okay, so this is like a little, none of these are going to make sense to you, but I'm going to go through. This was what my brain did to try to help me remind me of all the things to talk to you guys about. And so I was thinking about, okay, well, how do I explain to them how to get started? And when I was thinking about graphics, I thought about, the starting line of a race. And then it was like, no, that's not really appropriate, because I don't want you guys to think that it is a race, because commercial can, like I said, it's more volatile and it takes longer. So I sold an assemblage in downtown Morristown that I worked on for over 2 years. I have a property that is supposed to be closing at the end of April that I've worked on a year, but prior to that, I worked on another piece of land with that buyer for 2 years. And so here we are, where I'm going to be at the end of the 3rd year, and that's when we're finally closing on this piece of property. And so it's kind of, I felt like the starting points and the end point is very much more appropriate than the race, because there's different ways that you can get started in it. And it could be the timing of it is it can be all over the place as well. So the binoculars, the opportunities. I don't know if you guys have ever done any type of personality like evaluations and stuff. My husband's an engineer, and so he gets them at a lot of different companies. And so we did one as a family, and my personality ended up being a collaborator. And I was like, wow, that's very suiting for what I do for my career. And so my father-in-law got us little coffee mugs that have that on there. But you just have to, basically what it is getting creative and pairing people together. It's like we're matchmakers. And so one way to get started is the commercial listings that are already out there. Now, for you guys in Johnson City and let me see if I can figure out how to word this. Knoxville has their MLS split. And so the flex portion of Knoxville, the residential side, you cannot list any commercial property on that is more than 200,000. And then they have a commercial MLS. And so that one just got a new platform. It's called Moody's. And so the East Tennessee Realtors, that's where you would go to find the commercial properties. You can search those. You can go, I can send you guys that website. You can search those just as an agent. You just wouldn't be able to see the co-op compensation or any of the private remarks. But what I can share is the commercial agents aren't really putting private remarks in there. It's pick up the telephone and call them whenever they've got something. And so go on there and just look. Get familiar with the properties. Commercial takes longer, so a lot of these properties are sitting. And if let's see, it's what I'm trying to get across is to create opportunities for yourself. And so if there's a commercial property that's already listed, you've already got that portion of it out of the way. That seller is wanting to sell. And so if it's a warehouse, warehouses are probably the easiest thing to fill. The inventory is low. I'm going to say that's for Johnson City. That's for my area. That's for Knoxville. Like industrial properties go by fast And a lot of times they don't make it to the market. It's just by networking with the other agents, the other commercial agents. So with it, it would be like, okay, Larry, let's say that you know a guy that has a pest control company and his lease is fixing to be up, and you know that there's a warehouse that on the commercial MLS in Knoxville that's in your area, and that looks like that might be a good match for him. And then that's when you would call that agent and talk about how the leasing goes. And I'm going to get into leasing with you guys too. But it would be like, do you guys see where I'm going? It's like that, the hard part's already done about the commercial listings. They're there. Just think about, okay, well, what would make sense here? Or if there's, do you guys have Powell's in Johnson City? So let's just say that there's a vacant piece of land next to Powell's, and you think that, you know, you like Bojangles biscuits, and you would really like for there to be a Bojangles in Johnson City. And so this is work. It is work, absolute work. You're going to pick you're going to get on Google, and you're going to go to Bojangles, and you're going to get the phone number, and you're going to call them and say, may I speak to the person that handles your real estate? They're going to give you that contact, and you're going to call that contact and say who you are, what company you're with, and then you're going to say that there's this piece of property and we don't have a Bojangles in Johnson City, and I would really like for you guys to take a look at it, and then send it to them. And then you follow up with them. Follow up is key, and it may take time, or you put together a pamphlet, and it's not your listing. It's not your listing, Melissa, but it's available to be bought. And so you're taking that, getting creative, and selling that property. So as far as thinking about commercial listings that if you list, you last in this business. And so a lot of people want listings. My brain does not shut off when it comes to this. When I'm riding down the road in the passenger seat, I do it when I'm in the driver's seat too. I just get to be more intentional when I'm in the passenger seat, is drive by those shopping centers that don't have a tenant in them. Get that phone number for that shopping center. You can find it, either get the owner's name through public record, or a lot of times they'll have a sign in the shopping center. But if there is a vacant space in a shopping center, that's easy, you know, because they're missing out on money per month just because that is sitting there. And you got to get, everybody will have like their own spiel about why someone should list with you. I have recommendations, and I have my own personal things that I can share with a listing agent. And so that nail salon that I put in that little shopping center on the west end of Morristown, they had a sign just for lease by the landlord in that little space for 2 years. 2 years. And then I listed it and got them a 5-year lease on that nail salon, and they're making, you know, a few grand a month now. And so think about what that is doing to that landlord's bottom line. And that also is increasing that overall property value. And so with commercial, you'll hear income producing properties. And so that was the only, this is a little shopping center. So they've got 3 tenants in that shopping center. The one was vacant. And so they have a pharmacy, a nail salon, and a Domino's pizza. Now that they have that nail salon in there, that is a fully occupied income producing property. And so if that landlord ever wanted to sell this shopping center, it's going to be more valuable to a buyer, and they're going to be able to get more money because it's fully occupied. It also is going to give them more leverage too, because now they're going to be, if they needed, you know, if they're looking at another shopping center, then they have good solid tenants in this shopping center that they can go to the bank and get the money for whatever else it is that they need for their own personal financial goals. And then this telephone, I think this telephone might be for you, Melissa. So I wanted to put like, I'm gonna tell my age, you guys may know it or not, but do you guys remember like the clear light up phones? I was gonna put, and they like, all the lights went crazy whenever it rang. And so I wanted to put one of those on there because I wanted one of those stinking phones so bad, and my dad wouldn't get me one. But I thought this one just ended up working out better with this graphic. And so cold calling, I can't stress that enough. When you're riding down the road and you see a vacant property, you're going to go to public record. You're going to look up that owner. If it's an LLC, you can go to the state treasury, and I can actually share that link with you. You're going to look up that, excuse me, look up the LLC, find out who the registered agent is, and then go through all your avenues for Warren, LinkedIn. You will become a professional stalker, and not in a bad way. And I can honestly say that there's probably been a handful of people in the 7 years that I haven't been able to find, but you might have to use different avenues. For Warren's great. There's a website called truepeoplesearch.com that you can utilize that's free. Facebook is great. You don't have to reach out to them on Facebook, but you can find them on Facebook and find ways to contact them through Facebook, other ways to contact them. And so if you drive by and you see a property, this would transfer over to resident. I do it in residential too. I see a property that's vacant, it's been vacant for a while. I do the same process. I just write down the address, or I remember that, oh, it's on the corner of this street, go to public record, look up the owner and call it. With commercial, it'll be a little more difficult to find the people just because they're going to be under corporations.
How may I help you?
They're going to be under corporations, or the
Hey,
registered
I'm good.
agent
How
may
are
be
you
an
doing,
attorney
John?
for that corporation. And so there's lots of levels that you have to get through. You just have to have like the grit and the grind and the want. It is absolutely doable, and you just have to start the process and, you know, not give up. That's a good way to put it.
That's where I try to, as you're talking, I'm trying to figure out, how do I start? Where do I start? That's
Yep. So my next one, the light bulb and the gears and all of that. So I started in real estate as an unlicensed assistant, and then I became a licensed assistant, and then I became the man behind the green curtain. And so he was the face of everything. And I would say, oh, you've got a closing on Tuesday. And he'd be like, oh, yeah, what are we closing? And so I will say with commercial, it is beyond beneficial to get a mentor. Find someone that does commercial and work alongside them. Like I said in the beginning, Remax commercial is fantastic because they have not put us in a position where we're only allowed to do one or the other. The company I started with, Coldwell Banker Commercial, they were split. They did not allow us to do residential, and they didn't allow residential to do commercial. And they also were talking about in order to be a commercial agent with Coldwell Banker, which is now Wallace, that you would have to have your CCIM designation. And CCIM designation is basically like you have a degree in commercial real estate. I have started that process. You have to go through 4 classes, and then you have to have a portfolio to get that designation. And it takes some agents 7 to 10 years to get that designation. But like a lot of the big commercial companies, I don't know if NAI has a presence everywhere. So do you guys recognize NAI? That name at all? So they only do commercial, but for them, what they require is if you are going to be a commercial agent and you're going to work with them, you have to mentor and you have to do your first 11 transactions with that commercial agent. And the split is not fantastic. They actually do where, like, I will consult normally for a referral fee. NAI is split. That commercial agent gets 75%, and the new commercial agent learning gets the 25%. And so
a lawyer.
I'm just sharing that that's how a lot of the bigger commercial firms that only specialize in commercial do it, is they pair you with someone so you can learn. The guy that I started with, and he only did commercial, one, because that's where our company was and that's what he enjoyed. He had bought and sold 6 different businesses, but I absolutely got the golden ticket being able to learn from him. And he was kind of a chaos magnet. And so I really now feel like there's not anything that would be thrown at me that I wouldn't be able to get over and get, just figure it out, and hand holding. And so, if there's somebody in your office that's even dabbled in commercial, or really your brokers may and I don't know if they're going to be upset with me saying this, but your brokers may have to handhold you guys through the process, or you guys can contact me. It is very important that, one, not only for RE/MAX, because RE/MAX agents, I mean, we have absolute, I don't know how do I put this? We just feel like we're better. Like if there's a RE/MAX agents and another company, somebody recently said that when they see RE/MAX, they think experience, someone that knows what they're doing, and they can trust us. Okay. And so if that's the case, you don't want to be going out here and listing something or representing a tenant on something and muddling through the process, just trying to figure it out as you go, because you don't want to open yourself up for like the legal consequences of that. But two, you just want to make sure that you're doing a good job. And so when you think about mentoring, and a lot of people, I'm going to think about, I'm using a lot of residential examples just because that's what most people predominantly do. Is it's like the stinginess with co-op compensations. It's like, well, I don't want to pair with that commercial agent because I don't want to give this money away, and I'm new and I'm eager. And please do not let the sharing or the paying a consulting fee to a commercial agent stop you from doing that. Instead, change your mindset around and think, I'm investing in my future. That referral fee or whatever it is that agent wants to consult you through that deal or to co-list it, and you guys work it together and they teach you all of that stuff. Just look at that as you're investing in the future, because after you do that one commercial sale, you're going to have a way better understanding to go through that next one. And I'm not saying to do your first 11 transactions with a commercial agent, but if you haven't done a lease before, get with someone that's done a lease before. If you know somebody that is, that has done a warehouse, all I'm saying is just get with someone. Please do not try to just stumble your way through a process. Ask questions. There is so much information about this, and there's no commercial deal that's the same. With residential, we've got a checklist. We know all of the different things that have to be done. You will be thrown so many curveballs in commercial. You got to figure out, you got to be resilient. You have to figure out how to adapt quickly and get creative of, okay, well, this isn't going to work. How are we going to fix this? I am not familiar with, I have lots of commercial agent contacts in Knoxville. And I would also say too, I'm very much not a can't sit here kind of realtor, if you guys know that reference whatsoever. And I have no problem whatsoever calling there's a prominent commercial realtor here in Morristown, and I have no problem calling him and asking him questions. There's a developer here that also specializes in commercial and owns a lot of our stuff on the West End. That's a huge development. And I call him and network with people. So there is and please don't get upset with me, RE/MAX, but there is a listing agreement between two companies. And so if you have a huge multifamily deal, there is an agent in Knoxville, Solage. It would be like no brainer. Solage, I've got this deal. Would you work with me on it? I've had agents, I have a listing right now that I've co-listed with a different company because it's commercial and she's not with our company, but I know her and she trusts me, and so wanted me to be involved in it. And so just know that, just network. There's also a local CCIM chapter. Even if you don't plan on getting your CCIM designation, they have guest speakers and breakfast that you can go to and learn. You can network with those commercial agents. There's lots of training online. You can actually take a commercial core. So like if you're due for your core, you can do the commercial one and still get the same credit as you would your residential core. But that gives you that knowledge of the commercial, and they deal with that and leasing on the commercial core. I utilize YouTube a lot. you got to be careful on there because there's a lot of information, but I've gotten really good, even like with my like motivational stuff. I take I call them nuggets from people. And so what anybody says in actually gospel, you just take little nuggets that you pick up on and you're like, oh, I like that. I can use that. Just like here today, so something I've said may have made a light bulb go off for you guys, and you're like, oh, that's great. And that may be the only thing you take away from it. But I'm happy that you guys got that. So it's really, so Larry, have you thought about, are you still like, okay, well, the overwhelming feeling of where do I get started?
Yeah, just it seems, and that feeling is growing as you're talking.
I definitely don't want to overwhelm you guys. Commercial is exciting. And you know what's also exciting about it is there's less emotion. There is emotion in it, but
This is
you're
nice.
dealing with a completely different clientele. You're dealing with business people, you're dealing with lawyers, and they are more logical thinking instead of they're not letting their emotions drive them. Some of them are, but you also have more business hours. And so I can tell you that I don't work on weekends. It is very rare that I have something unless I have a residential deal that I'm working, a listing, and I have to deal with that. But for the majority of the time, I don't have to deal with real estate on the weekends, or it may take, 30 minutes of my entire weekend that I'm working on. It takes time.
Larry just got a commercial listing last week.
Who did?
Larry.
Oh, nice, Larry. That's exciting. So what kind of deal is it?
A gun store.
Okay.
So she has a gun store, a pistol range, and on the same property is a storage unit. So it's
Okay.
about an acre of land, and she'll either sell the real estate or the real estate and the business.
Mm-hmm.
So our difficulty right now is she's never run a P&L.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to extract the P&L information out of her tax records in order to make it more attractive, because no one will buy a business that you don't know what the numbers are. So anyway, that's where we are right now. So she's finally agreed to get all that stuff done, and now we're waiting on the accountant to do her job. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a personal friend I've known for years. She actually, what happened, she contacted a guy in Johnson City, and the guy sent her an agreement. And the two things scared her by it. One is there was no percentage of what he would make. So he wanted to sign a blank form, basically. And the second thing was a statement in there that said, if the business doesn't sell, I still get my commission. I'll put a lien on your property to get it. And so she sent that to her lawyer, backed out, and called me.
Yeah.
So
Businesses are very complicated when you have a business that they're trying to sell with the real estate. I am going to, so everything comes down to the numbers, and I'm pretty sure my next slide, we're going to talk about this. Actually, you can actually go to the next slide, Christy, so I can see if it. I'm not there yet. So let's hold off on that, Larry, and then we'll talk about it. So, I always go back to these 5 things. And so when you are pricing a commercial property, I'm going to let you know, when I first started pricing property for the guy that I worked for, he just kind of just threw me out there and was like, I want you to run comps for this. I would literally break out in hot flashes. I would get so nervous about trying to price a commercial property. And so, but if you go back to the 5 things, there's 5 factors that will determine if and how fast a property will sell: price, terms, condition, location, demand. I do full listing presentations for my commercial properties. I don't do them on residential, but I actually have a template. There is a template that is available to you through Remax Commercial called Build Out, where you can go in and build a listing presentation. You can build your listings on there. It goes to the Remax Commercial actual national page. But if you go through those 5 factors, and I use this on residential too, and it really helps break it down for your sellers to see how realistic they're being. Okay. And so price, a lot of times the price is the last thing that I want to talk about because the seller's telling me they want, $1 million for it, or God told them they were going to sell it for $1 million one day. And I've got to go through like the actual like comps of, well, here's the data. This is what I have. And so, whenever you're pricing those, always consider those 5 factors. And I hope that helps you too, like in your residential stuff. So if a seller comes to you and wants to know why is it not selling, you can use those 5 factors to go through and break it down for them. I'm not saying like, go ahead.
What were those 5 factors? Price, turns?
Condition, location, and demand.
I should have learned shorthand when I was in school. In demand. Demand for the property or demand for the services?
Not necessarily services, but if it's a warehouse, demand for warehousing is high.
Okay.
Demand for vacant land is not going to be so high in commercial. It changes, and so that it's going to be specific to your area. And so demand, let's say you've got somebody that wants to buy a car lot, and there's no car lots available, and there's no properties that are zoned appropriate for a car lot, and planning's not going to rezone for a car lot because planning departments and cities and counties don't like car lots because of the aesthetic of them. And so if you break it down to each of these, it's just going to help. And as far as condition goes with commercial, you will find out that people don't care about what color the wall is. So you go into an office, that nail salon was a insurance office. It had walls, and we went in and those walls came down, the ones that weren't load bearing. And so there's architects and engineers and other professionals that are going to be involved in your transaction when it comes to that. But just know that when you walk into an office, that office is probably going to be completely changed around by the time you're done with actually getting to the lease. I just did a office lease in Knoxville that was an office, and now it's going to be a daycare, and worked on it for over a year. So the condition, that's really going to be more with if you're going to sell a property or you've got a buyer that wants to buy it, it's going to be the main things. And I will say, if you've got a property under contract with commercial due diligence is completely different than residential due diligence. Commercial is just time, and it's very common for you to have 60, 90, 120 days of due diligence, and then you get to the end of 120 days of due diligence and you need 60 more days of due diligence. And you can do anything you want during that due diligence, and you can cancel for any reason, okay? So it's not specific to what is there in that contract. And so, and your appraisal and your financing and everything is lumped into that due diligence. So just remember that as well, that's not a separate contingency. And so that's going to be more, what the reason why I told you guys that is that there are like home inspectors that will do a commercial inspection. I do not recommend that. You guys know that with residential inspections, they tick sellers off and they scare buyers to death. In a commercial transaction, if your buyer has a question about something, I absolutely suggest just getting the professional out there to begin with, or getting a general contractor. And so if they've got a question about the roof, get a roofing contractor out there. If you got a question about the HVAC, get that person out there. If you have environmental concerns, get that person out there. Speaking of that, the lending on the commercial side is going to determine what due diligence factors are required. If they're getting a loan on the property, you're more than likely the lender's gonna require a survey, probably an alt survey, and an environmental, phase 1 or phase 2. And so you guys, I never thought that I would actually be able to understand or even know what phase 1 and 2 environmental is. But phase 1 is historical on the property. And so based on the history of this property, was there anything within a 5-mile radius that could have potentially contaminated this property? And the banks will require that. Or if you know that this used to be a service station, okay, well, there may be an underground storage tank in that ground. And then we've got to get a phase 1 environmental. And then based on that, we'll determine if you have to do a phase 2. And phase 2 is actually where they do the core drillings and, you get that information, and then the bank will say whether or not if there's any remediation or anything that has to be done with that. And so they're all of the deals are so complex. And like I said, so you probably wouldn't have even thought that there's still gas tanks in the ground. Some of them still have gas in them. Some of them have this concrete sludge that's in them. Some of them have already been taken out. And so all of that stuff some of it's documented, some of it's not. And so that kind of was like, I got a little sidetracked there on the condition, but just know that in due diligence, please do not take anything for, well, I really want this to close. So don't let the end result of the commission that you're going to get, because a lot of times the commission in commercial is going to be pretty substantial. Don't let the end goal of seeing that not allow you to really do a good job representing your buyer and making sure they're going through all the due diligence that they need to, just to get through it. And as far if you're representing the seller, you can't slim over things. Like I had a seller that he was furious that I was like, well, I know that this used to be a service station and there's probably tanks in the ground. And he was like, I don't want you to say anything. It's like, well, I also have the buyer too. I was just a facilitator, so I wasn't representing either party, but you as the seller, that's going to come back on you if you don't, disclose that there potentially was tanks in the ground. And it ended up being that there actually was a tank in the ground, but they had already done all of the process needed through TDEC to, close it, like make sure that, and that was like the concrete slurry that they put in it. So, okay, Christy, I think I'm ready unless you guys have questions about any of that.
Overwhelmed, Leslie.
Oh, what?
I'm still overwhelmed, Leslie.
Oh, I
So,
just,
so what I need to do is, what you're telling me, I need to
Hey.
call you when I get one.
you can call me, but let's take a deep breath. Let's do some breathing.
It's just a lot.
It is. And so I had told Christy, it is very possible that, there's going to have to be like other categories. This is just surface level. Okay. But like I said, getting with someone that understands it and is willing to put in the time with you, it will be super beneficial. Okay.
And if Leslie Jo's willing, and this is something we want to do on a regular basis, monthly, bi-monthly, every other month, something like that, quarterly, we can definitely do commercial classes as long as you guys are interested and she's able to teach it. Just let me know. We can organize something.
So if we could do it, on our own, if there's what do you call it? What do you call those classes? You just go through them and, shoot, I'm trying to think of what, just something on the computer that Remix has to offer everybody else.
Yeah,
It's just a
go
matter of
into your
being
Mac Center.
comfortable.
Go into Mac Center and pull up the Remax commercial tab. And you will
Okay.
go through and be able to see a lot of the stuff that is available through Remax Commercial. And they actually hold trainings that you can get in on. The associations will sometimes hold commercial trainings. But that just go into those and listening to those. So I wanted to talk about this part right here, and that's in commercial, you will find leased properties, and this is for residential too. And so I'm gonna let you guys know, but when you have a property that has a tenant in it, that no matter what, that price of that property is going to be determined by that amount that landlord is getting. And the numbers have to make sense. And so a lot of times there'll be a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex, or a warehouse that has a tenant in it, and the tenant's paying X amount of dollars, but the landlord wants $100,000 more than what the property would make sense to a bank to loan on. And so, but I can very easily see that that agent was excited about that little apartment complex that they got, and they priced it on a per square foot price comp instead of the money, the net operating income. That's how you're going to base that on, and everything is done on a capitalization rate. And so Chad Wardrop is here in the Morristown office, and he specializes in multifamily. And he sends out flyers every month, and I ask his permission to share one of the flyers that he did to send out to people that own duplexes. And so I'm not going to go through like this everything. I'm just going to skim on it. And so for this duplex, he shared a couple comps, and then he shares that the new owner brought the property at the 7.06 cap rate. And he's helping these duplex owners decide what is their property worth based on their net operating income. And so there's their rent, and then you have your taxes, insurance, maintenance, which landscaping would be in maintenance if they're managing it themselves. Are they paying a management company to do it? Those are all factors. And so you take how much money you make in rent, and you take your expenses on that property, and then you take your expenses and subtract it from your income, and that gives you your net operating income. And then you calculate that based on a cap rate. And so you'll see he's done the math for a 9, 8, and a 7. And so duplexes, depending on, those 5 factors: price, terms, condition, location, demand, duplexes are in demand. And so think about with a cap rate, a lot of like investors that are starting out will want like a 10 to a 12 cap. It's going to be each individual investor, and you guys will learn more about that as you meet them and know what their strategy is and all of that. And so duplexes are good for anywhere from a 7 to 9. If there's a Starbucks somewhere, a Starbucks or a Walgreens or somewhere like that, you could see that being more at like a 5 or a 6 cap. And so, but that's how, if there's a duplex that I want and I go to the bank's going to want to know what that net operating income is. And so it's really important with leased properties. And Larry, I'm going to use your gun store as an example. Your gun store is a owner occupied property, but let's just say that she has her own, her business. The gun store is leasing the property from her, even though I would think that's how she has it structured. If I was her tax person, that would be how I would advise her, even though I'm not a tax person and I'm not a financial planner or anything like that. But she should have a business, and that business should be leasing from that herself as the property owner, because then she would be able to write off her lease amount and all that. I have no idea if she's doing that, but I'm just using this one as an example since this is on the forefront of your brain. But now, if she's leasing that from herself for $2,000 a month, she's got her, I'm just throwing numbers out there, she's got her expenses, and you want to put that on the market. Actually, what you're fixing to do is the business makes X amount of dollars, and calculations on businesses are completely different than the net operating income. But let's say she's got her inventory. The bank is going to want to know, okay, well, how much have you allocated for the real estate? So you need to price the real estate completely separate than the business and the inventory. And then you're going to have to price the business. And so the business does not include her inventory. It's going to be, what does she want for her business? And then how much is the inventory valued at? And so when you've got a buyer, and then how much are the storage units making? So when you've got a buyer and that buyer takes that information to the bank's going to need to know how are all of these different numbers allocated. If this is $1 million piece of property, you can't just go to the bank and say that the seller wants $1 million for it. They're going to want to see how all those different things are allocated. So if she was leasing that building for herself, from herself, that would be a way that you could value that property. Like how much is that property worth instead of a price per square foot. But I doubt she probably is doing it that way. So you'll comp the building with the price per square foot, and then how much does she want for her business? And which is sometimes it's based on a multiple of 3. And so whatever she's made on that business times that by 3, that's how much the business is worth. You can find a lot of information online about how to evaluate a business and how much it's worth. And it's going to depend on, a laundromat's going to be different than a gun store. And then her inventory, how much is the inventory? And the bank's going to want to know that. And so I see a lot of times that people will just put a commercial piece of property out there, and then they haven't done any of the work on the front end. And I want you guys as RE/MAX agents because we've got our stuff together. We know our stuff, and because we're better, and you're going to have that information. Okay, already that way when an agent calls you, you're going to look like a professional commercial agent and that you know your stuff, and it's going to go better. And I remember one thing that I want to, from the beginning about the zoning and stuff that I wanted to touch on. I completely forgot, but it just popped into my head. And so it amazes me, it amazes me just because this is what I do. Okay. But there's so often that I'm on like the local Morristown Facebook page, or I've been in sales meetings before with RE/MAX where the agents themselves even think that we have this west end of Morristown that is really popping commercially. And we've just got Cheddar's and Panda Express, and we're getting McAllister's and a crumble cookie, and everybody is hot on this west side of Morristown. But the general community and even some agents think that the city of Morristown is the one that's responsible for putting those things on the west end. Why does the city put everything on the west end? Why does the city, we don't need another Mexican restaurant in Morristown. Why is the city making there another Mexican restaurant? It is not the city or the county where you were at that is responsible for this. That piece of land and that building is still owned by an entity or an individual. And then that person, decides if they're going to lease it. That person is the one that decides if they're willing to lease to Crumble Cookie or a Mexican restaurant or whoever. It's not the city. The only thing the city or the county has involved in is the zoning, and if that use is allowed in that zoning. Does that make sense? And so like one agent was really fired up that we've got so many cash advances here in Morristown, and how that looks like our economy is not as good as other places because there's so many cash advances. The city had nothing to do with those cash advances. It was that landlord was willing to take that company's money. and it happened to be allowed in that zone. So it's not the city or the county that's doing it. Commercial works just like residential. You've got a seller or a landlord, and they either want to lease the property or they want to sell the property. Okay, I think I'm ready I think the last one might just be me. Yep, that's me.
I have a quick
Good.
question,
Yep.
and we kind of talked about this before. If someone's in an area where commercial is the old boys club,
Me.
how
Okay.
can they break into that?
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what I did whenever I first came to Morristown, because when I interviewed with Travis, I wanted to, because we're a small town, I made note of all of the different advertising that was going on, the billboards, what company were they with, the commercial stuff, who was listing the commercial stuff here. And I interviewed with 2 different companies. 2 other companies didn't even call me back at all. And then we had the commercial company that's here, and he only does commercial. But I didn't want to put myself in that same situation I was in Knoxville, where I only could do commercial. So when I was interviewing with Travis told me that the things that I would be up against in Morristown, Tennessee for commercial would be that female in commercial that hasn't had any bearing whatsoever on my business. And well, how I'm talked to sometimes, but I'm 4'9". I've had thick skin since I was in the 5th grade, which is when I stopped growing. So men talk, it's a predominantly male business. And so I just let stuff like that slide off. But then he said, Morristown is a good old boy system. And so you have to figure out how to navigate through that. And I am still to this day navigating through this good old boy system. But I think personality has a lot to do with it. And then just grit, like the grit and the grind that I said. And so when I first came to Morristown, what I did is I made a point to go and put my face in front of the big players here so that they would know who I was. And if I ever called them on the telephone, they'd be able to put my face to my voice. And so I knew some of them were already represented. We've got a big name. The Bunches are a big time name here in Morristown. And so Travis told me, well, I handle their residential stuff and Terry Ball handles their commercial stuff. But that didn't stop me from still wanting to say, I'm Leslie Jo Dedrick and I'm with Remax Commercial now. And I just wanted to introduce myself to you. I'm local to Morristown now, tell them a little bit about myself. And I just wanted, if I ever call you, I just wanted you to know who it was. And it was just simple as that. Or I would walk into their office and do it. Or I would call and talk to them about one of the listings that they have listed. How can I help? And do I think that some of them probably rolled their eyes at me and maybe possibly had some stuff about whatever, like good luck, that's fine. But like I said, I have a way of like, bringing myself back to, my core, and I think about my happy place and why I'm doing this business. And everybody should have that. And mine is that I want a clean house and I want my husband happy and my son happy. And when be able to sit on my couch with a candle burning and know that, have peace of mind that the bills are paid. And then at the end of the day, I think about all those people and did they have any bearing on where I was at in that moment? Did that commercial agent that was hateful to me about whatever, did he have any bearing on me when I was in that moment? I think you guys should also do that with, residential agents and the ones that have watched too many episodes of $1 Million Listing. Think about your happy place.
That's a fantastic outlook.
Yeah. So think about your happy place. And none of those people at the end of the day have any bearing. Larry, I don't have any bearing on your happy place at the end of the day, but I'm a nice person and I just don't like being mean. So I'm not going to do that to you. And so Melissa, think about your happy place. And Sean, we're Christy, I'm not leaving you out either. And so just know, and then you'd get up the next day and you do it all over again. You'll get one. It's fishing, fishing. You just put it out there. And one day something's going to bite, you're going to get it. And then you're going to have a better understanding. And then you're going to like fishing. So you're going to go fishing again.
Does anyone else have any questions? This was great. I got a text. Bridget had to jump off. She said this was a fantastic class.
Great.
It was a good introduction.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Leslie Jo. This was a great. We've never had a commercial class because there's so much to unpack in it. So this is our very first class. So we thank you for doing this.
You guys are welcome.
It was a big undertaking.
You guys wanted to hear from me. That's nice. Thanks.
So perfect.
You go by Leslie Jo, is that right? Or
I
just
do.
Leslie or
Leslie Jo.
Leslie Jo? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah,
well, thank you so much. Guys, this is recorded, so it will be up on the Linhart Realty Group training site on YouTube. So if you want to come back to it or need to come back to it, especially look at some of the slides, it will be up there in a couple of days. So you can visit that as many times as you want to then.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.